Welcome, Patriots, to this episode of Common Sense for America. I'm your host and commentator, Bruce Rutherford. The nation was surprised, to say the least, by the size of the Trump victory. Vice President Harris underperformed Joe Biden's 2020 numbers almost across the board. Three key factors explain President-elect Trump's victory margins. Trump was wise to ask voters, are you better off today than 4 years ago? The Biden administration's economic performance, especially on the issue of inflation, was a great weakness, and Trump exploited that very well. Vice President Harris was always in a difficult position because it was hard for her to run on the Biden-Harris record in office, and yet she could not look disloyal to Biden. The nothing comes to mind answer to whether or not she would have done anything differently from Joe Biden damaged her far more than we realized at the time. The immigration issue was a killer for the Democrats. Vice President Harris could not shake off her image as the immigration czar, and the nation's dissatisfaction with Biden-Harris policies on immigration was a major negative for her. In an earlier episode, we questioned why the Biden administration would allow open borders and illegal access to our country when they knew how unpopular their policies were on that issue. Compassion for illegal immigrants does not explain the policy. I conclude it was an effort to implement change in the composition of the voting public in America. The American voters rejected this policy in a dramatic way. How do you feel about this? Did you also reject this? I'd love to hear your comments. Get back to us whenever you can. We love hearing from you. Now, the third explanation for Trump's victory was his success in expanding the base of the Republican Party. Trump attracted black males, Latinos, suburban women, and blue-collar Americans in far greater numbers than anyone expected. He has changed the character of the Republican Party at the expense of the Democratic Party's one-time base of voters. Trump achieved this by focusing on the financial welfare of the individual voter and his or her family. His no taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime promises won many voters from the middle class and down the economic ladder. Democratic efforts to turn out the black and Latino vote largely backfired as lecturing to those people. In the end, Trump won the popular vote by approximately 5 million votes. It's interesting to note that almost 80 million votes were cast in early voting. Historically, large turnouts of voters, and especially early voters, have favored the Democrats. But not this time. Control of the Senate was a part of the red wave. The Senate won enough seats to give Trump and the Republicans at least a 53-seat majority in the Senate. And it could still end up at 54-46. The Senate has elected John Thune of South Dakota its new Republican leader in the Senate. Their majority in the Senate will be a huge asset to Trump during his first 100 days when he hopes to install by law, not executive order, many of his campaign promises. The House of Representatives went to Republicans in this election. The Republicans have all three parts of the legislative and executive branches in their control. This gives them tremendous legislative power, which I fully expect they will exercise on key issues in the first 100 days of the next Trump administration. What can we expect in the next 100 days? I expect the new Trump administration to introduce a blizzard of legislation in its first 100 days. The legislation will probably include 1. Funding to complete and defend our southern border wall, and that will be authorized almost immediately. 2. Replacing the current immigration laws with a new system favoring qualified applicants who have STEM qualifications or can fill jobs waiting for them here in the U.S. 3. Steps to deport illegal immigrants who are known criminals will be streamlined, as will efforts to find the getaways. Deportations will probably begin immediately. 4. Regulations previously issued by government agencies that contribute to inflation will be rolled back as will regulations that are seen to inhibit economic growth. Legislation to curtail government agency issuance of regulations will be introduced, but passage of that legislation will take more time. 5. The existing Trump tax cuts, which we have today, will be made permanent. Legislation to exempt tips and overtime will be passed. 6. Trump will replace all the heads of the various executive departments. And now, he doesn't need legislation to do this. He'll just do this on his own. 7. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy will be given a broad mandate to examine government operations for improvements in efficiency. Their findings will take longer than 100 days, but they will be successful in identifying $2 trillion of savings. My own examination of the budget tells me this won't be a problem. They will find that money. We will desperately need to implement those savings ideas. 8, Trump will reaffirm U.S. support of Israel. Now, in response to the election, Hamas has already said they're open to a ceasefire. Hamas is afraid of larger U.S. support of the Israeli war effort. Israel may now not want a ceasefire now that they have their enemies on the run. 9, Trump will try to broker a deal to end the war in Ukraine. Ukraine and its European allies will not agree to any settlement that does not return all Ukraine's territory, including the Crimea. Trump will probably threaten Putin privately with immediately admitting Ukraine to NATO and the European Union. Now, admitting Ukraine to NATO immediately invokes Article 5 of the NATO Charter, obliging other NATO countries, including the U.S., to come to Ukraine's defense. Putin cannot win that conflict and should back down, but doing so will be a huge blow to Putin and Russian prestige and set back Russian partnerships with China, Iran, and North Korea. This would be a huge foreign policy win for the U.S., Ukraine, and NATO. But there is a risk it could start World War III. 10. Trump and the Republicans will do nothing about the abortion issue. They will rely on the Supreme Court decision and leave the issue up to the individual states. Now, 7 states have already passed laws or constitutional amendments making abortion legal in their states. Florida narrowly missed achieving the 60% vote necessary to do the same in Florida. Over the next few years, more states will act to legalize a more liberal abortion law in those states, making the issue of abortion in the U.S. a moot point. 11. Federal voting laws need reform. The Republicans will introduce legislation to require for all federal elections, I'm speaking of federal elections now, not state elections, a government-issued photo ID or fingerprint identification. Vote harvesting will be made illegal. Absentee ballots will be confirmed in the same manner as in-person voting and will not be counted if received after the polls close. Now what for the Democrats? The Democratic Party must take stock of their loss and rethink their approach. Trump and the Republicans have changed the persona of their party to that of the party of the common man and not the party of the wealthy. The Democrats are now seen as the party of the privileged and the wealthy, the party of the professional politicians who ask us to vote on huge bills and read them later. The abortion issue is being decided state by state, and that removes a key issue for the Democrats. If the economy improves, and that's asking a lot to see it improve from where it is today, the Democrats will have a very difficult time recovering from this defeat. For the first time in decades, more people are registering as a Republican rather than a Democrat. If the Republicans continue to successfully focus on what I call kitchen table economic issues for the average American family, they will continue to gain favor with the voting public, and the Democrats will be left with nothing to talk about. This election will be analyzed repeatedly, over and over again, and I know you will discuss it with your friends and your colleagues. Please tell us what you think and what they say. We love hearing from you. And I hope you will join us next time when we examine socialism, the lie. Until then, God bless you and God bless America.